There used to be a show on television, and there may still be a remake of it at some point in time, called The Love Connection. And people would go on the program and they would question several prospective dates or partners, and then from those questions and from their kind of interviewing them, they would select one. And afterwards, they would be able to spend an evening out with one another, and then they would come back and tell the audience how their date went. And sometimes they would describe a very fun evening and talk about how they really hit it off with this person. But more often than not, they ended up talking about how it didn't go well, or how something was miserable in it, or how something just didn't go right, and how the date kind of fell apart. But there is a moment of how we really tend to choose people nowadays in our relationships. And there's even programs now like The Bachelorette or The Bachelor, which kind of plays on this theme of having contestants come and trying to ask them questions or spend a little time and build some kind of romantic theme or setting with one another in order to be able to find your soulmate. And we have things now and even on the internet, that promises to help us to find our soulmate, that one person in our lives who really deeply connects with us. And these services try to match individuals according to looks, according to activities, needs, and character. Since people usually seek a partner who looks and acts like they want and how they like, and who can fill my needs. However, good looks and even similar activities and a suitable character do not always lead to love, nor are they the same as love. The point that we are going to try to make in all of this is that God created marriage to last a lifetime. And then He also has given us the ability to love each other for that long as well. And we want to look at how we can keep that love going. We have really a romantic myth that we've built up in our culture, and really Western civilization. And attraction to the opposite sex has been around really since Adam and Eve in their time together. And in Western culture, we've romanticized everything. We've popularized it in books and in movies in our culture, always looking for Mr. or Mrs. Right to come along. That person who is just right and the only one for me. The person who can come in and sweep you off your feet, or there's only one person in the world that's suited just for my personal needs or my personal desire. But really, until the Middle Ages, if we look back through history, marriages were not organized that way. Marriages were organized by families, and they were strictly supervised. And this was a universal custom. This began to change, though, in the 16th and 17th centuries as French songwriters and others would write these romantic ballads. And they introduced these ideas of romance and ideas of falling in love and things such as love at first sight. And they would do this to entertain French lords and ladies at the royal court. And this was, in all points considered, a departure from the custom, really, of history, in which you were either chosen for or done according to family or tradition. But this was not the customary way of contracting marriages. And in the past, many times it was based on ability to provide. It was based on family background. It was based on agreement on political, social, and religious beliefs. And there were still impulsive elopements all throughout history. There certainly was adultery throughout history. It's nothing new necessarily for someone to look and think of one as being attractive, or thinking, well, this just happens to be the person for me. But using that as the main cultural basis for choosing a partner, that really is new. In later days, in earlier days, it was more out of the ordinary for someone to marry for those reasons. And it's more of a newer thing. Arranged marriages were the way things were, and they were done. And in many cases, it worked. It worked for building lifelong, faithful marriages to a single partner. And in the French idea, as it was being spread, the heroes of these stories in songs, they were always brave, they were beautiful. Common people were not thought capable of the same kind of emotions in these love stories. And that's still true today. When you watch these movies, these fantasized movies, it's always some heroic person. It's never the everyday, ordinary, plain person. And they're always built up and made to seem like that. Most of the time, your actors are some of the most beautiful people in the world. And we fantasize that, and we long for that, and we look for that. And the culture of romance was, even back then, for the rich, until the French Revolution, when the nobility in France fell. The stories remained and were passed on to the masses and spread throughout Europe and spread through all throughout Western culture, and we still are spreading it even today. Until that time, falling in love, with all the emotional stress and strain that it brings, was considered an unfortunate experience. It was preferred that one's marriage be based on careful selection and approval by both families, and everyone wanted this, even the individuals, in their selection for a spouse. And the introduction of romance as an art form made it, at first, an acceptable marriage compared to the traditional marriage arrangement, in which someone was selected or it was given as approval by the family. And today, arranged marriages are now the unnatural and rejected by most Western society as the way to be married or to come to marriage. So the point that we're trying to make here is that successful marriage does not depend solely on how carefully you arrange it or how romantic or infatuated the couple is. I mean, really, if you look at it, in Eastern culture that mainly still goes with the traditional way of contracting marriages, in many ways has a lower divorce rate than our Western civilized romantic way. And what we see here is it doesn't come down to whether your marriage was arranged or whether it's had its romantic origins. In fact, both of them can fail. Both of them can lead to unfaithfulness. Both can lead to misery. Both can lead to the couple not being able to spend eternity in heaven, which is our ultimate goal in marriage. And I've heard it said marriage is not so much about our happiness as it is about our holiness and being right with God. And so we have to understand that. Understand for centuries, arranged marriages succeeded in producing lifetime unions that were satisfying and productive. For the last several centuries, however, marriages that began with a simple romantic urge have also been able to produce long and successful unions. Both you can see success in. But in the end, the marriages that work are the ones that base the relationship on love. And maybe that's where we have to start making a distinction. The distinction between romance and love. Not compatibility or romance, but love. And I want to make that distinction between love and romance. First of all, romance produces the wrong expectations. Romance produces the wrong expectations. Previously, as we said, in older Eastern cultures, young people were preparing themselves for conjugal living with such thing as collecting a dowry, obtaining education, building a home, developing work or child-rearing skills. And those were the ones that were most the most eligible bachelor or bachelorette. The marriage relationship was allowed to grow with the context of a home and shared commitment to family, land, etc. The love was the product of spending life together. And so as we kind of see in that older way, traditional way of doing it, when the marriages were arranged, you built up good characteristics. You built yourself an education or learned a skill. You learned how to provide for a child or whatever it may be. And then when you came together, then you built love. The love was the product of you spending time together and sacrificing for one another. And today we prepare for marriage by looking for and usually idealizing the perfect mate for ourselves. Right? Looking for that perfect person who can, when we look at our own marriage, we look for someone who can match our image. And after they have found Mr. or Mrs. Right, they marry and begin to learn how to live the conjugal life together. See, we do it kind of backwards. We fall in love, or so we say. We fall in love, and then we learn how to live together. And I'm not suggesting here that you come and live a life together in a house and you experience all the blessings of a marriage. But usually how it is, we fall in love, and then we try to figure the rest of life out. We fall in love, or in romance, and then we figure out what we're going to do with the rest of our lives. We've reached the pinnacle or peak of our relationship, that ultimate romance, that ultimate feeling. And now we got to figure out how we're going to do the rest of our lives. But history shows that one method began with very little emotional investment, but still had the opportunity to grow with knowledge and practice, whereas maybe in our modern method, we begin with total emotional investment. We are committing all of our emotions, all of our romance to a person, and then we try to learn how to adapt to that. And what usually happens, again, this romance starts to emphasize the wrong things. Romance looks for immediate spark or fire. You know what I'm talking about. When you first see that person or you first meet that person and you feel that little spark or flame or attraction to that person. And that's what romance is about. Romance looks for that immediate spark or fire. And here's the thing. If it's not present, we will often reject a potential partner or someone who's already our partner. And we reject them spiritually, emotionally, socially, and looking for someone who can reignite that spark for us. Romance's courtship is based mostly on the pursuit of physical intimacy, ignoring the more important elements of human relationships. Romance searches for a partner that feels good and looks good, but ignores issues such as character, adaptability, comfort, things which make for long time relationships to be possible. Someone that you can live with forever. But again, in our way of doing things, we fall in love, and then guess what? Well, we can change them. or they'll change. Instead of finding that person. And that's why we go through on our Sunday nights. When I grow up, what do I want to do? I want to marry a Christian. I want to marry first someone who is dedicated to the Lord and dedicated to a lifelong marriage. In the long run, a lot of times how neat or messy a person is impacts a marriage more than how good looking they are. Marrying someone who is sloppy, or marrying someone who doesn't have a good character or is known for lying, that's going to impact your marriage a lot more than how good they look. Because as we all know, these looks can change, these things can fade, but a good character, a godly character will remain. And that's what we're looking for. And romance, again, can emphasize the wrong things. Romance also, a lot of times, doesn't want to take advice. How many young couples who are so head over heels in love have you tried to counsel, but they won't take the advice? Why? Because we are in love, and I don't care if the whole world knows it. And we are so in love, and you just don't understand. We have something that, you and Dad or you and Mom, you just don't understand. And they're not willing to hear and to take advice from that. They're not willing to hear the benefit of counseling, of mentoring or teaching, because what they feel is real and the major determining factor in their decision to marry. In doing this, they miss out on important marriage preparation advice and guidance that they should be willing to heed. Romance also, in many cases, demands perfection because, again, what are you trying to do? We're trying to live up to that idealistic expectation, right? You started a flame, and you have to keep the flame going. When? For life. You have to keep that flame burning for life, because if you don't, then I might look for someone who can. Because that's what matters to me. That's important. I want my flame. I want that fire. And we're swept up by this fantastic feeling about this person. And it's good to have those feelings. But you can't base a marriage upon that. What happens, however, when this perfection, this intensity of feeling drops? What if it's not as intense as it was before? Does that mean that your marriage is no longer as exciting? It's no longer any good? Romance is not about building something. Romance is about maintaining something. But marriage should be about building something. It should be about building love, about building faith, about building holiness. Your love should be even more intense now than it was before. And I'm not talking about the romantic feeling. I'm talking about dedication, keeping the promises, keeping the commitment, keeping your word. Things that really matter. When romance slows down or disappoints or stops, we look for something or someone else to give us that feeling. And then we say, as we probably once said before, this one is the right one. I can just feel it. And the cycle starts over and over again. And so that's why we choose love. That's why we, as Christians and as God would have us to, choose love. Again, something different, not the romance that we're talking about. There are several emotions or experiences that we all have referred to as love, but the kind of love that is necessary to make a marriage work requires two things. First, a commitment to make another's welfare equal or better than one's own, and self-discipline to back up that commitment. So again, the first being a commitment to consider another's welfare equal to one's own. And this is the highest form of human love. When people marry, they make a promise not just to be each other's spouse, or to never leave. They promise first to love and honor, respect. The commitment is to do this whether a person is in sickness or in health. Good circumstances or bad circumstances. Marrying is taking on the responsibility of caring for another as well or better than we care for ourselves. Now, how would you like to live with that person? You see, our love, our commitment, again, is based upon that, a discipline to commit another's welfare to ourselves. But it's also a self-discipline. Love requires self-discipline. We do not promise self-discipline, though, but we need self-discipline in order to carry out the promises that we have made. Paul in 1 Corinthians 13 tells us about love. And he talks about love. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous. It does not boast. It's not arrogant. It's not rude. Then we say love is faithful. What is that? This is the behavior of self-control. Love is about having self-control. The commitment to consider my partner's welfare equal or above my own requires me to control my sinful and selfish impulses. For example, I have to pick up my wife at 10 p.m. from somewhere, but I'm at a friend's house, the championship game is on, and it just went into overtime. But it's 9:55. What am I going to do? Meet my commitment and promise to her? Or am I going to please myself? How about, I love him, but there's this new man at work, and he's giving me signals, and I'm really attracted to him. And I'm starting to feel that fire rekindled in me. How about I'm tired, but she's tired, and the baby is crying at 3 a.m. I'm preaching myself on this one. It's about love, putting that other person's need before your own. And psychologists say that some people are unable to love, not because they do not feel attracted to others, but because they lack the self-control to accomplish what love requires. Considering another's welfare equal or greater to our own is part of that self-control. Marriages built on this definition of love, whether they are arranged or whether they are a result of some romantic impulse, will survive. It will grow because they have the single most important ingredient, building on that love. And we put that at the center, a disciplined commitment to another's welfare. And then things might blossom from that. You start to see another person's physical attractions. You start to see things that you really admire, their beauty, things that they do. You start to build admiration for that person. And you even at times find compatibility of interest. There are things that Jennifer and I do today that we've developed. She's learned to love certain things that I do, and I've learned to learn certain things that she has done. And you build that over time. You work on it and you grow together. And we build on this commitment to love. Love, again, is that commitment to another's welfare equal to our own. It is sustained by self-control. And this is the basic ingredient to a successful marital relationship. And once we have this in place, we can begin to add in all the other things to give our relationship its unique identity, its unique flavor, its unique direction in life. And if love is in place, it is a joy to add those other elements. It's a joy to live with that person, to be with that person. And this is what growth in marriage is all about. If something else is at the core, it will not support the difficulties of life that are sure to come and will not promote growth into other areas. It is never too late to take our marriage apart. Not talking about divorce, but to take it apart and re-examine the relationship and look and see what's at the actual core of my relationship with this person. And then put it back together again with love at the core, with that commitment to self-discipline, that commitment to put someone's welfare equal or greater. And if we just stay at that equal, then that's human love. But we are called to have a Christ-like love, which means we put even other people's interests above our own, because that's exactly what Christ did for us. Yes, we need Christ at the center of marriage. And what we've done when we place that kind of love at the center of marriage, we are putting Christ there. Because that's exactly the love that Christ has for us. A love that says, I'm going to put another person's or group of people's interest even above my own. And I'm going to use self-control to do it. And that's exactly what Jesus did for us on the cross. That's the pattern He gave us for our marriages, to love our spouse, to love one another. How? As Christ loved the church and gave Himself for her, putting our interests above even His own. Tonight, Jesus Christ loves you, And He has made that sacrifice for your sins. And so tonight you have the wonderful opportunity, if you've never had it before, you have it tonight, to obey the gospel that you may receive the forgiveness of your sins, that those sins can be washed away in the waters of baptism by faith, that they will be remembered no more. No one forgets better than God. When our sins are washed away, He forgets them and He never remembers them again. Tonight you also have the opportunity to take apart, examine your marriage, and reassemble it with Christ and a Christ-like love at the center. And continue to build from there. If you need that opportunity, if you need the prayers of the church, or you need to respond to the invitation, won't you come as together we stand as we sing.